Today I'm continuing our coverage of the Heresy sandbox updates with the exotic and weapon changes that were previewed in the January 23rd TWID. There were proposed updates for exotic armors for all three classes, some updates to glaives, some updates to exotic weapons, some general weapon buffs, and some weapon perk buffs. I'm not covering every single thing in this update, but I am only focused on covering what connects to builds. So, to that end, I'm not going to be talking about the general weapon buffs. You can read those yourself. They're very short. And I'm not going to cover every weapon perk buff or every exotic weapon buff because some of them won't really affect builds or they're just kind of cool damage buffs or things like that. But I will cover everything that affects builds. I'll try and give you my best insight. I know I'm a little bit later than others, but I've tried to give you really thoughtful information on this and some good interactions. And on top of this, I will be giving you 6 builds, 2 for each class, using the updated exotic armors that you might want to give a try to once Heresy comes. Those will be towards the end, and I will have dim links in the description. One more thing before we get started. I make slides for every single one of my videos, and these will also be linked in the description. So feel free to refer to them, scroll through them, whatever works for you. I'm trying to help you out and be as convenient for you as possible, even if it gets me less viewing time, because I want to make good content. And with that, let's get into it. I'm Engineer. First up, we're going to cover the Hunter Exotics. The first few are just the simplest changes. I've reordered some of these from the TWID article just to make it easier to flow. So first, Renewal Grass, they will gain frost armor twice as fast. And this isn't just you, it's you and your teammates. So doing a little bit of math here, if you are in a Duskfield bubble, you will get to 5 stacks after 2 seconds. That's 31% damage resistance after 2 seconds, just being in the Duskfield bubble. Really great. I think this might actually become very viable in damage phases because it's so strong and so quick. Keep in mind too, frost armor also got buffed. It does more. So on stasis, you can actually top out at 50% damage resistance, which is really, really good. So definitely something to keep in mind. Nothing really changing on the build here. It's just an existing build getting much better. Now, next one is Radiant Dance Machines, which is getting a pretty big rework, it sounds like. So it's going to improve some stats of the weapons, just primary ammo weapons though. And then multi-kills with primary ammo weapons for fun dodge energy. And when dodge energy is full, they'll grant extra charges. This sounds pretty cool, but it's very much up to how it lands. How much dodge energy do you get back? Now, the one downside here is this used to be really good for damage phases and stuff, and it's dead for that because it only refunds dodges on primary ammo weapon kills, which is fairly specific. So we'll see how this works out. Maybe it's really cool. Maybe you can spam a lot of melees and dodges, and the dodges will do more, but it is a wait and see exotic for me. Very short buff here. Foe Tracer and Spirit of the Foe Tracer, their 4 times weapon surge duration is up from 10 seconds to 15 seconds. Awesome. No notes. I just made a build video on this a couple weeks ago, and it's fantastic. This is great because the duration was really my only problem with Foe Tracer and Spirit of the Foe Tracer. Lastly, Spirit of Galanor, minor nerf. They're reducing the maximum amount of energy for Silk Strike and Golden Gun down to 30% from 50%. These are both roaming supers though. I really don't think you're going to notice this too much. Moving on next to Sealed Ahamkara's Grass. This has always just been a generally pretty pointless exotic. Maybe it had some use in PvP, but doing a little bit of upgrade here where powered melee and finisher final blows grant Nightmare Fuel, which is a buff. It could be healing and airborne effectiveness, but while it's active, a freshly drawn weapon gets additional damage and will give you more Nightmare Fuel on final blows. And every time you gain Nightmare Fuel, that reloads all holstered weapons. So I think there's really a kind of cool setup here where you are going back and forth between melee and weapon kills and melee and weapon kills. So naturally, it kind of sounds like 1-2 punch is a really good fit. Or you could use Bastion, which basically is built-in 1-2 punch. Shotguns are just really natural because you're in melee. Now, if you think about melees with 1-2 punch, the best melees for this that I think will work are Solar Fan of Knives, Arc Combo Blow, or Disorienting Blow. There's also several melees where it does not work at all. Anything with AoE basically not working. On Prismatic, you have access to Fan of Knives or Combo Blow. So I'd probably focus on Combination Blow on Prismatic. I think that's a really solid thing. Another thing to keep in mind though is that grapple melee should activate Sealed Ahamkara's Grasp because it counts as a melee and a grenade. That could be really strong on Strand or Prismatic. Sounds kind of interesting, but once again, until we know what the damage buff is on Nightmare Fuel, we'll just have to wait and see. Oh, Gwisin Vest. I remember getting this exotic way back in Forsaken and really wanted to make Spectral Blades good. It did not. They're doing a few buffs here. One, you will get your super return when you do the heavy attack on super hits, as well as kills before becoming invisible. So that's helpful. That helps on big targets, so you can spread out that super even longer, whereas before it only worked for ad clear, which is very kind of mediocre. The maximum possible super energy return is also being increased, so that should help. The most interesting part to me though is that now whenever you exit invisibility, you will make a smoke cloud around you that also weakens enemies. And that works in the super and out of the super. So a lot of weakening going on. I think this kind of lends to a melee or shotgun playstyle. I really hope this is good. I'm kind of thinking of it with like a shotgun or a glaive maybe. I think this could be good. I really hope it is because Spectral Blades is just one of the worst supers in the game right now. I want something to make it viable. Last thing I want to mention here is that using Stylish Executioner, when you come out of invisibility with a melee, you will weaken enemies with that. And if you are using a shotgun with Trench Barrel, that will proc the 100% damage boost on the shotgun, so you get weakened, and the boost on the shotgun. That's really strong. Repulsor Brace would be really cool here too, because the enemies are weakened. So when you shoot them, boom, instant overshield, and they can go back invisible again thanks to Stylish Executioner. Really cool loop. I think it might work well with this. There's only one weapon I think that has this combo, and it is the shotgun from Prophecy. I don't have this roll yet, but I'm probably going to farm for it just because I'm really excited about this prospect, and I like that dungeon anyways. So something to think about. Moving over to Titans, we have a few pretty straightforward buffs here. Citan's Ramparts is the exotic that makes it so your barricades are transparent to you, so you and your team can shoot through them. Basically, they just unnerfed this for PvE. They didn't really do anything else. They absolutely annihilated it because of PvP a while back. So now it's hopefully still viable. This kind of makes sense with the new arc aspect on Titan called Storm's Keep. So you can buff your allies, but you get cover and you can shoot through it. It might also make sense on Bastion barricades on Void, so it's nice to see this back in the world of the living for PvE. Ursa Furiosa and Spirit of the Bear are now changed to, instead of restoring super energy when you block with Unbreakable, will restore grenade energy. This is more synergistic, but I'm a little bit medium on this. Titans now have no exotic class perks for faster super regen. I actually like this a whole lot because you could get 20% of a super back if you blocked enough damage. It might help with Unbreakable spam. I think the exotic class item perks that make the most sense with this are Inmost Bear or Bear Armamentarium, and those should be really solid because Unbreakable is getting a lot of buffs, so hopefully this works. But once again, it's going to depend on how much you get back, how easy it is, and all that stuff. Lastly in this group, Insurmountable Skull Fort. This was an exotic that would just restore your melee charge if you killed somebody with your melee. Really good, but this new perk will give you energy to arc melees when hitting targets with any melee attack. Not just kills, but just hitting them. So in some ways it's a buff, but it's not clear if doing a full kill with a powered melee restores a full charge, because that's what you get right now. And I mean, that's what got me through the legendary Final Shape campaign, because I've used that in Thunderclap and just Thunderclap pretty much the whole campaign up to the Witness. So once again, I just can't really judge this without seeing it. I hope it comes out really good. I've always liked this exotic, and I like the idea of it having more viability, but just have to see. The next exotic I want to talk about is Eternal Warrior, and it's getting a really small change. Final Blows with Fists of Havoc now grant extended super duration. Super simple. This is already a really great exotic. Just to point out, as you get arc kills, you get arc weapon surge. If you get a arc multi-kill, you get 4 times arc weapon surge for 11 seconds, and you can keep refreshing it with more arc kills. And you also get this when you come out of Fists of Havoc for 30 seconds, which is a crazy long amount of time to get a 25% damage boost. So this could be good. Once again, we don't know numbers. I really wish Bungie would start giving us numbers, but it's nice to have a Fist of Havoc exotic. I'm gonna try it out. I think it might be kind of cool, and it's always been a pretty fun roaming super, so we'll see what happens. The last Titan exotic is Khepri's Horn, and this is getting a pretty major change. So instead of sending out 1 wave that returns back, it's sending out 3 waves that do not return back. It pretty much seems like they're just copying the Abandoned Leap Strand Lashes, but just making them fire, which I'm not complaining about because it seems like these track, and those have always been pretty good. As it says in the changes, the tracking has been enhanced. The combatants damaged by these waves are enveloped in a sunspot, which is really cool. This seems like it might be a way to generate a sunspot on Prismatic, or without using the Sol Invictus aspect, so that's really cool. It does require a Solar Super to be equipped, but that's pretty typical these days. A couple things to note, currently Khepri Sworn does 60 Scorch stacks on a hit, and if you have Ember of Ashes, it takes it up to 90 Scorch stacks on a hit, which is 10 shy of a full ignition. With a sunspot built in, this should be an ignition 2 seconds after you hit. It also will give you 15% class ability energy whenever you get a solar weapon kill, so that's really strong too. Let's stack Strategist on with this. Aberrant Action, for instance, can roll that. It's craftable. On Prismatic, this might be really fun pairing with Drinker's Lash, because it's just like you're suspended and on fire, and that just seems really cool. And you have exotic class item perks too, so you can do like Inmost Horn, which is a really funny name, to just spam a lot of fire waves, or Abandoned Horn. So I think there's some really good options here, and this might finally be viable and interesting. It actually is pretty good right now. I tried it recently and it's not terrible. It's just not going to compare to some of the best builds. Moving over to Warlocks, we have a couple small changes. Secret Filaments and Spirit of the Filaments will now give class ability energy per kill while Devour is active. This is fine. It really depends on the amount. Class ability is generally one of the hardest abilities to regen, especially rifts. The flat gain penalty halves all the flat energy you get for rifts, so I'm hoping this isn't affected by that. There's a few exotic class item combo perks that might work better because they rely on the class ability, like Spirit of the Vesper, Spirit of the Starfire, so hopefully this helps those out. Still seems kind of mediocre, and the perk is fine, but I mean, most of the time you're taking Feed the Void for the full Devour, and it's just not worth to get one more source of Devour. The smallest nerf possible to Speaker's Sight is coming, and it's just that it only heals allies who need healing. This is really just so you don't get Ember of Benevolence for free forever. While you have Speaker's Sight equipped, your teammates will need to have some damage, but we have 2 Arc Exotics that are getting buffed. First, Storm Dancer's Brace. This is getting its damage bonus doubled per stack. It'll go up to plus 200% damage. But the super return is being dropped from 50% to 30%. I don't think it's really that bad. You have to kill a lot of enemies to even get the 50%, and roaming supers are so easy to get right now. Oh, one other nice little buff is the Ionic Blink will now use half as much super energy, which is kind of nice because I like using that to move around. I think this really solidifies this as this is the Storm Trance exotic. Crown of Tempest is kind of up there and can give you more duration, but I think it's just flat out better. So definitely gonna be looking forward to using this. Not much about it's really changing dramatically though, so any builds that are working right now should still work pretty well. The other one is Geomag Stabilizers, and this is the Chaos Reach exotic armor. So first I ran a new perk. If you sprint while near max bolt charge, specifically if you have 6 or more bolt charge, as you sprint, it will top those off. And that lets you summon the Bolt of Lightning on your next ability use. That's pretty solid, but the really big part here is that they're making the super energy gain from ionic traces go from 2% to 7%. That is about 14 ionic traces and you have full super. And I don't know if you've played Arc Warlock, but you can make so many ionic traces. It's so easy. You will be shooting giant arc laser beams left and right with this. This is going to be so much fun, and definitely a build I'm going to be trying out on the first day of Heresy on Warlock. Now, our last exotic is Verity's Brow, and this is getting buffed to have a meter similar to Wormgrad Caress. And the best part about this is now when you run out the timer on the buff, it's just going to decrease 1 tier instead of completely dropping off. They are reworking the grenade regen now to be a flat percentage boost per second, which is really solid. And they're also adding this to Spirit of the Verity. So now Spirit of the Verity, instead of just giving a grenade damage boost, will also give regen, which makes grenade perks on all 3 classes, because Spirit of the Verity is on all 3 classes, exotic class items. It's going to make all of those more useful. So if you have any kind of grenade build across any of the classes, Spirit of the Verity stocks are going up. I've loved this exotic ever since it was added. It is great on every single subclass, and I think it's going to be even stronger now. If you don't know, on Verity's Brow, just Verity's Brow, not the exotic class item, if you use a grenade ability while you have any stacks of death row active, your teammates get 10 times grenade regen speed. Not 10%, 10 times. That's 1,000% grenade regen speed. And it's only for 5 seconds, but that is a crazy amount of grenade regen speed. If you had 3 people using this, it's just crazy. I think it's actually even used in like speed runs. It's low man runs for raids. It's really good. Very excited for this. I also think it has a lot of play on the new Arc Warlock aspect, if that is technically a grenade, because you can boost that damage as well in addition to your normal grenades, and that's just gonna be really fun. That is everything we have for our exotic armor buffs, so just moving into some of the weapon things. First up, Glaive Buffs. They are increasing a lot of stats on glaives. Aim assist, aim magnetism, damage fall off ranges, all going up. The glaive projectiles are going to hit a little bit better. They're boosting the effects of stats like handling, magazine size, projectile speed, reload speed. They're just generally going to feel better. They did something a little bit like this for hand cannons about a year and a half ago, and it's fantastic. One last bit, the final hit of the 3-hit melee combo will do double damage, which is really good and means you don't have to learn some weird melee cancel nonsense to do maximum damage with a glaive. So this is good. I expect a lot of glaive artifact perks in this episode, but glaives have always been fun. And on that note, we have some exotic glaive buffs. We have 4 exotic glaives. There are the class exotic glaives, and they are all getting a global buff. The special shot is no longer tied to glaive energy. You just have to get 6 weapon hits to get that special reload, and it increments off both shots or melee hits, so that's really cool. On top of this, they are adding elemental weapon perks to all 3 glaives. So the Arc Hunter one, Edge of Concurrence, will get jolting feedback. Edge of Action, the Void Titan glaive, will get destabilizing rounds. And then Edge of Intent, the Solar Warlock glaive, will be given incandescent. This is amazing. All that is great. All those perks are really good, and just getting them on an exotic is fantastic. One last thing on Edge of Intent, the special shot impact will do a little cure pulse, and the healing turret won't target allies that are at full health. It's kind of the same thing as Speaker Sight. Not a big deal though. Now, our 4th glaive though is Excalibur. The special perk will get triggered by scoring a melee kill while your overshield is active, and that will refill your glaive energy to full, which is really good. The Void Overshield charge rate to nearby allies when you're guarding is also increased. This is also really good. As you guard, it just gives you Void Overshield. And as of this episode, Void Overshields have 70% damage resistance. So this is just very strong and very tanky. I honestly didn't notice this, but apparently Excalibur has always had a damage bonus to Vex, and it was 10%, and now it's going up to 25%. And on top of that, Excalibur will now briefly disorient non-boss Vex with its melee attack. So that's just really good. This has always been a really solid glaive, but it's just getting even better now. Moving over to our general exotic weapons. First up, Delicate Tomb. This is a Arc Fusion Rifle, has kind of a special projectile pattern. This now boosts the Ionic Trace drop chance from 4% to 10%, which is pretty substantial. And the PvE damage bonus on Tempest Cascade is going from 30% to plus 100% extra damage. There's no timer on Tempest Cascade either. You just get it until it's fired. If you're not aware, you actually trigger Tempest Cascade just by picking up an Ionic Trace. This to me makes so much sense on Warlock with how many Ionic Traces you make, but all classes can benefit from this. That's really good. I think it's going to go very hard with the Geomag Stabilizers Warlock build, because the Ionic Traces will boost the damage and give you super, and you'll be generating more of them with this weapon. Really solid. Darcy, the exotic heavy sniper, has been kind of down in the dumps for a long time, and this is now going to basically become the Galahorn of snipers. It will empower all your teammates' snipers as you get crits, and when you empower enough, you will also get a damage boost, which is really solid. Yeah, you get 15% extra damage. So, really solid if you're using snipers in a damage phase in like a raid. It's going to make a lot of sense to have one in the team. Lastly, we actually have a buff that's hitting 3 different exotics, and that is all 3 of our exotics that have the perk Fundamentals. This is the one that lets you switch between Solar, Arc, or Void, and it's on Hardlight, Borealis, and Dead Messenger. So now, if you apply a verb matching the element that you are on, you get a 30% damage buff. So, say you are on Solar and you're running Speaker Sight and you heal yourself or allies, 30% weapon damage buff instantly. Really strong. I think this is going to be pretty good. Dead Messenger sounds really fun with this. I mean, really all these are very good. So, and on top of that, they've also removed the different stats based on current element, and they've just applied what they thought the best stats were to Borealis specifically. So it still feels pretty good. A couple Fallen themed weapons getting buffed here. This would have been more fun last season, but that's okay. Queensbreaker can have special reload at any time to switch between scopes. You don't have to select it in the menu. That just lets you select the default. The marksman sight is the kind of long range shot that changes between enemies and blinds them, and it now has more range on it, which is really good. Blind is a great verb, so I think this is really solid for like endgame content. The combat sights are now like a 3-round burst, and you can boost up the charge as you deal sustained damage on a target, so this might actually end up being pretty good for damage phases. So just a really versatile exotic that lets you kind of work for hard content, maybe like blind an unstoppable champion because that's a counter for that. And then you can switch into a damage mode pretty quickly. Our other one is Lord of Wolves. The biggest change here though is that Release the Wolves now triggers on hip fire instead of having to do a special reload. Fires full auto, more damage, rate of fire, you get less accuracy and range. And if you have the catalyst, you get some stat boost built in, but while Release the Wolves is active, you will scorch enemies, which I think is really cool. Might make this viable in a few more builds. And it looks like when you are aimed on sight and you defeat targets, that will spread scorch to nearby combatants, so kind of like Incandescent. So just generally going to be a pretty scorchy weapon, which I think is kind of fun and maybe useful in some solar builds. Our last exotic weapon changes that we're going over are for Wardcliff Coil, Cloud Strike, and Thunderlord, and it's just that now all these can give bolt charge. Wardcliff Coil will give bolt charge to all nearby allies for every 2 rockets fired. Basically get 4 stacks of bolt charge per trigger pull. Cloud Strike will now give you a stack of bolt charge on rapid precision hits. And if you get precision final blows, you will also get a larger amount of bolt charge. Thunderlord, the original lightning exotic, will now generate lightning strikes from above, and those give bolt charge. And this all happens when you get final blows. So this may not come in as much during like boss damage phases, but if you're ad clear with Thunderlord, you're just going to see lightning strikes and bolt charge, which is more lightning strikes. All cool, all fun. One weapon perk change that's happening is Destabilizing Rounds. So this now will give you volatile rounds for 2 seconds if any targets are hit by the volatile burst, which is really cool. You'll technically get an anti-barrier counter for 2 seconds, and then the internal cooldown on Destabilizing Rounds has been dropped from 4 seconds to 1.5 seconds, and this is huge. This makes the uptime so much higher, a lot more volatility. This perk has gone from kind of medium and roundabout to really strong. This is also going to be so much more reliable with Pulsar Brace to proc that and get the Void Overshields. Just a few recent weapons to think about with this. Choir of One from episode Echoes with the Stabilizing Rounds is going to be insane. It's already so good, but having more consistent volatile rounds is just going to clear stuff so fast. Ancient Gospel from the Reprise Garden of Salvation is a really good gun with great perk pool. It can roll Destabilizing Rounds and Explosive Head, so it's basically like a Void's Owlie's Bane. So good now that Destabilizing Rounds will be buffed. Grid Skipper from Revenant is a really good pulse rifle. If you don't have Revenant for some reason, Elsie's Rifle from Onslaught is also a really good Void pulse. And lastly, we have a World Drop Hand Cannon, Mahe's HC4. That's a 2-round burst Void hand cannon, and also really solid, great perks, but very random. But it's also in the Lost Sector rotation right now, so definitely get it. This is gonna be fun. I definitely recommend using this, especially if you're using any volatile builds or prismatic builds. Now, I want to start getting into some of the builds. So how I've structured these is I'm giving you the abilities, aspects, the fragments, just very high level. I'm not going to make full build videos on these now. I've seen some content creators do that and I hate it, honestly, because why would I make a build video if I can't show you how it's actually going to play with the content that we're aiming for, which is Heresy in a couple weeks. So we're not going to do that, but I will give you these. You can get them set up, you can equip them, and then try them out day 1 of Heresy if you think they sound interesting. So, like we talked earlier, Sealed Ahamkara's Grasp. This is built around quick swapping guns, melee kills from combination blow, paired with 1-2-punch shotgun or bastion. Your aspects are Stylish Executioner and Winter's Shroud on Prismatic. So your dodges are going to slow enemies, and then you'll go invisible when you kill those slowed or otherwise debuffed enemies. Your super, it can be Silkstorm or Tether, both are fine. We want to get a buff off of Facet of Purpose, and those both give you damage resistance. Grapple Grenade is what I recommend here because it should trigger Sealed Ahamkara's Grasp. Our melee is Combination Blow, 100% flat gain factor, really solid melee. It's going to fit with this loop really well. And then Gambler's Dodge, obviously, so that you can keep that loop of Combination Blow to dodge to Combination Blow to dodge over and over again. On the Fragment side, we want to take Facet of Dawn because you can get the Radiant boost just when you do your melee, which we will do frequently. This will be 20% damage boost in Heresy. You can also do Facet of Blessing, so melee final blows start health regeneration, which is really good because Prismatic Hunters do not have a lot of healing built in. Facet of Protection just makes sense for damage resistance while you're surrounded. Facet of Purpose gives you a little bit of damage resistance as you pick up those orbs. Facet of Courage will make it so your light ability blows deal 10% increased damage. You can do your slow dodge with Winter's Shroud. And then when you punch the enemies with combination blow, 10% extra damage. Some other perks to think about: if you're using a kinetic weapon like Bastion, Faceted Grace is good because it will boost your Transcendence energy pretty considerably. And then there's also Faceted Balance just to keep some ability regen going. On the mod side, just focus on weapon damage and orb and super generation. Doing a lot of melee kills, a lot of dodging, so equip Reaper, equip a couple copies of Heavy Handed, maybe even 3 copies if you're punching a whole lot. And then just make sure you have weapon surges for whatever weapon you're primarily using, so we can really just stack up the damage boost as much as possible. On the armor stat side, max out your resilience, max out your discipline, boost your mobility and recovery a little bit, but most of your ability loop is self-sustaining, so you can just keep strengthening it like the 30, and you don't need a lot of mobility and recovery. Our second build is Gwisin Vest on Void. So the goal of this is we just want to keep chaining invisibility and weaken to get orbs and super energy up close. So our aspects, we're going to take Stylish Executioner and On the Prowl. And then for our super, we will take Spectral Blades so we can make that exotic work. Our grenade, I usually take something like Scatter Grenade, has a 75% flat gain factor. Then you can also take Magnetic Grenade, it's same cooldown tier and everything. You have to take Snare Bomb, that's your only option, and then Gambler's Dodge, just so you can get that Snare Bomb back if you need to. Talking about our fragments, we want to take Echo of Starvation because it gives us Devour, which is our main survivability on Void Hunter. And we get Devour anytime we pick up an Orb of Power or Void Breaches. We will get both of those every time we kill a weakened enemy, and we should be killing weakened enemies pretty much constantly. Now, we do have a 10-second cooldown on Echo of Harvest and generating Orb of Power and Void Breach, but that's not too long, and we'll still be doing that pretty often and getting orbs other ways. We also want to take Echo of Reprisal because this is a roaming super focused build. So we want to get that super energy, and we should be surrounded by enemies pretty often, but safely because we're invisible and we're just constantly looping that invisibility. Lastly, we want to take Echo of Persistence. It's going to make our Devour and our invisibility last longer, and that's just really valuable. Now, for some other fragments you might think about, Echo of Instability, give you volatile rounds when you get grenade kills, which is okay. A little bit more AoE damage. And then Echo of Undermining puts a weaken on the grenades, but it does come with a minus 20 stat penalty to discipline, so you may not want that necessarily. For our mods, we want to focus on void weapon damage so we can get those kills and get back into invisibility fast, and we just want to focus on class ability regen. Because we have Stylish Executioner and On the Prowl, we just need to always have our melee up so that we can use that to get back into invisibility quickly if we need to. For the armor stats, max out resilience and discipline, get recovery as high as you can, put some points into mobility, and then strength and intellect can just sit at 30 so you don't take a stat penalty. Moving over to Titans, we're going to do an Eternal Warrior build, just because I really want Fists of Havoc to be good finally. And really the goal of this is just get into Fists of Havoc, then use it as long as possible. So our aspects are going to be Knockout and Juggernaut. We're just going to be really focused on the melee kills. And we're also trying out some of the newly buffed stuff here. So super is obviously Fists of Havoc. Our grenade, I like Flashbang Grenade, has the shortest cooldown of all the arc grenades, and it blinds enemies, so that's pretty solid. For the melee, I'm going with Ballistic Slam. This has a 70% black gain factor, but it should give you Bolt Charge, which gives you melee energy for each enemy hit. So I think there should be some pretty good spam here, and the damage is getting boosted, so should be pretty reliable kills. And then like the hands-on mod should give you a lot of super energy so you can get to that roaming super faster. On our fragments, we want to take Spark of Shock just so we have a way to apply Jolt with our grenades. Spark of Resistance makes a lot of sense because we're kind of playing in close quarters and we want that damage resistance. Spark of Amplitude will give you an Orb of Power when you get a multi-kill while amplified, which we should be pretty often thanks to Knockout. And Spark of Frequency will give you an extra stack of Bolt Charge whenever you gain Bolt Charge. So it's going to work really well with Ballistic Slam. We will also be getting Bolt Charge from Juggernaut, so that's good. Some honorable mention fragments are Spark of Beacons, which lets you blind with special or heavy ammo arc weapon kills while amplified. And there's also Spark of Momentum, which is a little bit weird, but if you slide over special or heavy ammo, you get Bolt Charge, which translates to melee ability energy. So this might be good, but we need to see the values on all that to really see how it works. For your mods, just make lots of orbs, make lots of super, and then focus on your melee. Armor stats, max out resilience and strength, then get as much recovery and discipline as you can get, and then just intellect to 30. Our second Titan build is for Khepri's Horn, and we're actually doing it on Solar, and it's really just to focus on that Scorch to Ignition loop. We just want to cause as much Scorch and Ignition as possible to fire waves. For our aspects, we're going to take Soul Invictus and Consecration, just get even more sunspots and also have some fire waves out of our melee as well. Consecration's really good, and we should have it up pretty decently because of all the scorching. So we'll see about that. You really could take Roaring Flames though to boost the damage of it, but it's not clear whether that boosts the damage of Khepri's Horn, so I haven't taken it right now. For the super, I take Hammer of Soul. It works pretty well with the sunspots, and with the being a roaming super, you should get back pretty fast. You actually could take the other solar super though, because it is a roaming super as well, so no real harm there. Just go for the fire wave theme. I'm going with Thermite Grenade. There's only 62.5% flak factor, but just more fire waves, and we're really just trying to throw as much scorch on the field as possible. For the melee, we want to take Throwing Hammer. It's the shortest cooldown, so really solid. And then for the class ability, take Rally Barricade because it's shortest cooldown. On our fragments, first off, we want to take Ember of Ashes because that increases the scorch stacks and should get Khepri's Horn to 90 scorch stacks, which would be great. We're then going to take Ember of Char, so the ignitions will also apply Scorch to enemies, so we can kind of get some chain explosions and just clear everything out. And then we're going to take Ember of Searing, which will give us melee energy back when we kill scorched enemies, which is all the time. And then last, we take Ember of Singeing, which gives us even more class ability regen speed for 3 seconds anytime we scorch an enemy, which is literally all the time. So we should be able to spam that barricade pretty often. A honorable mention is Ember of Benevolence and Ember of Torches. Ember of Torches gives you and allies radiant when you do a melee hit, which is really good. And that would actually proc Ember of Benevolence, which gives you plus 400% base grenade, melee, and class ability regen speed for 6 seconds anytime you buff an ally. You could also throw on the healing grenade and do this that way too, but this just seems a little bit more awkward to fit, and I'm just going maximum damage here. On the mods, we just want to make as much orbs as possible and regen the class ability. I would do a utility kickstart in this case because that's really the core of our whole build, and then just build up as much ability gem as possible. On armor stats, max out resilience, max out discipline, then strength, then recovery, and electric 30. Should be pretty straightforward. If you want a weapon on this, a strategist incandescent weapon is really good. Aberrant Action from episode Echoes is a solar rocket sidearm that has that combo and would be really, really good. So that's probably what I'll be using for this. Moving over to Warlocks, we're going to start with Geomag Stabilizers. And this is an old build. I actually already have a build video on this, but there's a few updates here because of the fragment changes and bolt charge stuff. I want to make as many ionic traces as possible to get our super back. So generally I recommend pairing this with either Delicate Tomb or Cold Heart. Both are Arc special exotics, and they make ionic traces from their exotic perks on top of all the ones we'll make. For our aspects, we take Electrostatic Mine so that when we kill an arc debuffed enemy, we make an ionic trace. And then you can take either Arc Soul or Ionic Sentry. I'm probably going to take Ionic Sentry just for the newness of it, but Arc Soul is really good and it works for boss damage phases for you and your allies. For our super, we obviously want to take Chaos Reach. That's what the exotic works for. If you're not aware, the exotic makes the Chaos Reach super last a lot longer and has some extra lightning strikes. Generally right now, I'm going for a Flashbang Grenade because it has the shortest cooldown and we're just trying to get as many Ionic traces as possible. Ball Lightning is the much stronger melee and it has some range on it, so that's what we use for that. And then I like Healing Rift just because don't have a whole lot of healing on Arc. For our fragments, we want Spark of Shock, so that grenade will not only blind, it will also jolt. And then we want Spark of Beacons because then those special weapons we're using will also be blinding enemies every time they kill them, and that is just more chances to make Ionic traces. Spark of Discharge will make it so that every time you get an Ionic trace, you also get a Bolt Charge, which is really, really strong. And then Spark of Ions will make it so that when you kill jolted enemies, you get an Ionic trace every 10 seconds. And also when you kill an enemy with a Bolt Charge, you will also make an Ionic trace. So just getting even more of those so we can have that super up constantly. Honorable mention fragments, Spark of Resistance is damage resistance, and Spark of Amplitude will make orbs. But we get more super from Ionic traces than we do from orbs, so I don't think this is quite as necessary. On our mods, we just want as much super energy, as much orbs as possible, because this is a super build, and then just boost your arc weapon damage, because you'll be using it pretty heavily. On armor stats, max resilience, max discipline, get as much recovery as you can, and strength, and electric 30. Really straightforward. Our second Warlock build is also an arc one, and it's with Verity's Brow. And this is just built on supercharging those grenades and hopefully Ionic Sentry, which counts as a special grenade, so doubling the damage on that should help out some just to clear out even more stuff. For our super, I like taking Chaos Reach. I like a little bit more than Storm Trance, but you can definitely use Storm Trance too. It really just depends on what content you're doing. Because we are working to make our grenade as strong as possible, we want either Pulse or Storm Grenade. Pulse is better for single targets, and Storm Grenade is better for crowds. Both have the same cooldown and same flat gain factor of 62.5%. Melee is Ball Lightning. It's just the better melee and has some range on it. And then we want to take Healing Rift because we don't have a lot of healing on Arc. For our Fragments, we want, this is very similar to the last one, but we want Spark of Shock, so those Arc Grenades also jolt. Spark of Discharge so that Ionic Traces get Bolt Charge, and that we also get more Ionic Traces, get weapon kills. We want Spark of Beacon so that those weapon kills, if they are a special weapon, create a Blinding Blast. And then we want Spark of Frequency so that we get extra Bolt Charge whenever we gain Bolt Charge. On top of that, if you score a melee hit, you also get some cool stat bonuses and faster reloads, which can be really helpful. The honorable mention fragment here is Spark of Resistance. Damage resistance is never bad, so I think that's always a good option if one of these other ones doesn't work for you. So just use your weapon and then use your grenades as much as possible and just keep that loop kind of going. Big thing here, make sure you're using a special arc weapon. You really could use the same ones from the Geomag build, Delicate Tomb or Cold Heart. Both are really good on Arc Warlock. And with that, all done. That's been a lot of content. If you have watched all this, thank you so much. If you haven't watched all this, I also understand. I include lots of timestamps so you can check it out. If you have a chance, maybe throw it on in the background and let some playtime go, just because I'm new and it helps me with the algorithm. Just some conclusions here. There's so many good buffs here. They actually did a really solid job. The Hunter Exotic buffs are a little bit dependent on what the final numbers are. Titan Exotic buffs will depend a little bit on how the abilities they're paired to work. Things like Unbreakable with Spirit of the Bear, or what they change about Khepri's Horn and that ability. So, and then the Warlock Exotic buffs seem pretty targeted for Arc. The Weapon Exotic buffs are just really solid. I'm pretty happy with these. They've had a lot of weapons that were kind of underwhelming, and generally I'm just feeling pretty good for Heresy. That pretty much wraps up the video. I expect to maybe have one more video this week before Heresy launches. We get a dev live stream tomorrow previewing Heresy and hopefully the new exotic armors, so I'm very excited for that. That'll be the last bit of build crafting. I may also make a Reddit post to compile all these builds just so people can refer to them. I think we have a lot of fun stuff going. I will be out of town as Heresy launches and playing a little bit remotely, but probably will be a little bit late to having content out, but hopefully these builds help you in Heresy. And then if you do want to talk about builds, I do have a Discord, which will be linked in the description. I have a good little small community. Then we talk about builds constantly, and I preview stuff that I'm talking about, or because I get excited and want to show off. So definitely check it out. It's been pretty fun so far. Really appreciate all the support on the channel, and thanks for watching. Have a good one.